Engineering and Stantec for taking on this task. And I look forward to hearing the results and your recommendations and seeing if we can do to straighten out our stormwater issues. That being said, I'm going to pass it over to the city manager because I think she's got something she wants to say before we get started.
Yes. So just to give you a little bit of background, in 2017, Panhandle Engineering introduced to us the Master Stormwater Plan. The commission adopted that plan. There were about 25 projects on that plan. And before the storm, we started to work just a little bit on the stormwater study. Because one of the things we had to do first is identify those problem areas. We identified that in our stormwater plan. Then we had to, in order to even think about what kind of fee, if any, assessment, we have to go through a study. And that study was handed off to Stantec. And several people within there have been working on this for quite some time. I think it's probably been since maybe 2019 that it started back up and we started doing this study. So now we're at a point is, we know the what, we know something about our stormwater issues. Now, how do we fix those issues and how do we fund those issues is part of the questions, and we'll maybe find some answers to those today. I'm going to ask that our attorney Kevin Obos just make a few remarks. I know he has to leave, so I wanted him to go on and make those remarks, and then I'll introduce you to the team from Stantec.
Right, thanks, Vicki. And yeah, I just want to apologize in advance. I have to get over to another city commission meeting at Springfield at 5:30, so I'll be stepping out of here probably in the middle of Stantec's presentation. But one thing I wanted to point out is over the last couple months, you've seen us do the resolution of intent and that new assessment ordinance, and all that has us teed up. And I know one of the recommendations in the report you're going to see today is for a non-ad valorem stormwater assessment. Right now we just have a utility fee, almost like water and sewer, and that's an option as well. But in the event you guys do want to pursue a non-ad valorem stormwater assessment, we've already put the work in and have that teed up to happen this year if need be. So that's what that resolution of intent was all about, and then that stormwater, or not stormwater, but the assessment ordinance, which lays out the framework for enacting a special assessment, whether it be stormwater or anything else, but it would certainly apply to stormwater. So I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that. If you wanted to go down that road, the city is in a position to do that this year.
Mm-hmm. So this workshop today is really to present to the commission and our residents the findings, see where we are, see where we need to go in the future, and some decisions we'll have to make. So I want to introduce the two people that we've been working very closely with along with Panhandle Engineering. We have Doug Cook in the audience. We have Chris Forehand, also from Panhandle Engineering. But the two people from Stantec that will be presenting today and have worked very, very closely with us is Kelly Westover and Kyle Stevens. And so I'm not going to hold any longer. I want the opportunity for them to present, and then, of course, questions, and we can go from there. So Kelly and Kyle, if you will come and join us and begin your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vicki. So what I'd like to do today is just go through, we've got a slide deck prepared. There's a number of parts of the analysis and recommendations we'd like to go through. Here's our quick agenda to get us started here. So we've got some key issues, and this will be the only slide that's not on your deck there. I added this one in after we printed it, if you're looking for it. But key issues, we'll go through the stormwater fee study, some benchmarking as well to show you how Lynn Haven compares to other municipal peers, as well as the stormwater impact fee. That is one element of the study that's a little bit different. You have an impact fee for new development and new growth that pays that as they come onto the system. Timeline, if you were to move forward with the non-ad valorem assessment, and then the results. So we'll jump right into it. I want to put this slide in quickly, though, to get us to start to think about some of the real key issues that were distilled as part of the study. So One item with regards to stormwater, it is an enterprise fund, and what we mean by that is the accounting is separate from that of the overall city. It's much like water and sewer or solid waste in the fact that we think of it as like a business-like entity that's supported by the fees for services. Currently, it's not self-supporting. That's going to be one of the key issues we'll jump into right away, but the fee does not generate enough revenue to pay for the expenses today, just the operational expenses of the fund, not even thinking about capital yet. There is a transfer in the form from water and sewer that supports about 61% or so of the revenues to this fund on an annual basis as of the fiscal year 21 budget. So that's where the majority of our revenues are coming from, the water fund. As Vicki alluded to, there are a number of projects that are identified in the Stormwater Master Plan, and so we'll be talking through those and how we'll integrate those into this fund over the next few years, looking at doing a little bit more capital projects than we have historically done, and how that would then fold into what the fee needs to generate for revenues. And then finally, which I think is really a pertinent one for this community in particular, is reserves. And so currently there's no money in the fund. But best practices in the industry when we go around is to get a little bit of cash in the bank for a rainy day. No pun intended. Things do happen unexpected. You know, there's storm events or there's infrastructure failures that we're not intending that we need cash on hand for. So jumping into it, the overview of the parts of the study, I like to think about these as a sequence of interconnected investigations. And so the first one we'll call the revenue requirements. And in real simple terms, what we're really talking about here is thinking about how much money do we need each year. So what are the operational expenses? What are the capital expenses? Any debt that we may have? What are those obligations that we need to pay each and every year? And we're going to forecast that out for the next 10 years to get a really good picture of where we think we're headed. Next, we're going to look at the fee basis. So this is fundamentally applying a measuring stick to parcels to determine their use of the system. You can kind of think about this, again, using that analogy of the water system like a water meter. It's how much you're actually using the system and the benefits you're deriving from the system. And then finally, the fee structure will be how do we organize the basis in a way that we can turn it into rates and fees that we can charge customers to recover revenue. And then I'll show you the customer impacts from what customers are currently paying today versus the recommendations of the study and the impacts that would have on the parcels and customers within Lynn Haven. So jumping into it, the revenue requirements being the first part, I figured a good starting point slide is this one right here, which shows the fiscal year 21 adopted budget and the expenses. And so kind of starting at the bottom, we've got personnel and operating. And what I like to think about those are the activities and the people that really make the system efficient. So this is when we're out in the field and we're cleaning the catch basins and the pipes and doing the jetting that makes sure the system's functioning effectively. Additionally, on top there, we've got some capital assets. Those are in that particular year, some vehicle purchases, some real minor capital. Historically, you've not had a lot of capital investment, though, in this system. Now, corresponding to that is the revenues of the system. And as I mentioned, starting at the bottom, the stormwater fee revenue, what we see in a really mature stormwater fund or any enterprise fund is typically the fee revenue is the largest source of revenue, and that's the fee for services that are related to what parcels are benefiting the stormwater services we're providing. So I mentioned the water transfer is the really large component right now. And then additionally, we've got some other revenue, interest earnings, miscellaneous fees, and then the stormwater impact fee revenue. And that makes up the portfolio of revenue that we get. On a go-forward basis, so we don't believe that this is sustainable to continue to take transfers from the water fund and bring that into the stormwater enterprise fund, especially as we talk about some of the needs of the system. And if we talk about capital, that'll be next in a second. You know, there are needs out there. You would have to expand that transfer to continue to meet those needs. So just to highlight, limited capital funding capacity is something that really comes out clearly, and then the majority of funding currently is coming from the water fund. Additionally, one of the really key aspects of this study was integrating the Stormwater Master Plan. And so I've put up here a listing of projects on a year-by-year basis going forward. Now, historically, we haven't done a lot. What we're showing through this is there's a lot of needs in the community. Additionally, one of the things that was really critical was leveraging outside money. And so what I mean by that is there are grants available, and Lynn Haven has gone through the process and now has been approved for a number of grants on these projects by which you have a 25% local match, but then 75% of the funding is coming from the federal government. So that is really, when we think about a stormwater utility, a really key benefit of having this system in place and some fees where you can put that money and then be able to leverage it up. And you don't have to have ratepayers pay for it fully. So we've incorporated that in through 2024. All of these monies for projects are just the local match. But then going forward, we don't yet have approval for those projects. So what we've done to be conservative is put the full project amount in there. And obviously over time, if you were to approve for grants, you could potentially do a little bit more projects or mix up the exact timing of those because you'd be able to leverage that outsized funding. So what this is next on this next slide, I'm going to give you two of these. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this one to get us oriented. This is the dashboard of our financial model. So when we take all of those inputs in the blender and mix them together, this is how we can see the entire utility at the 30,000 foot level. And so I'm going to go through a key aspects of this. On this top left-hand graph is the operating fund. And as I mentioned, kind of starting out when we put it all together in 19, you can kind of see there's no blue bar there. And the blue bars represent the ending cash balance at the end of the year after we've got revenues in and paid all of the expenses. And so what we're saying is there's really no cash in the bank, if you will. That was one of the key findings, was to start to build a little bit of reserves in there so that you have a little bit of money for that rainy day. If we move forward, what I've got on the bottom is the capital plan. And so historically, we haven't been able to fund much. What we have entered in this first scenario is the 100% plan. And so we're funding all of the capital I just showed you on the last graphic within rates and impact fees. You can see the green is rates, and the blue is some impact fee money as we have some new accounts that come online. They'll pay for a little bit. Well, no, I think the really key important things is over on the right here is borrowing. So within this model, if we didn't have enough cash coming in the door, what we would do is solve that by potentially borrowing. What we're showing here today is a plan with no additional borrowing. So you don't need to have any bank loans or additional revenue bonds to put capital in the project. So this is a cash-funded plan. The hallmark of sustainability, what I'm trying to do here from a financial planning perspective, and the black line is the cash in, and the orange line is cash going out. And while there's a lot of graphics up here, it's really just as simple as your own personal bank account. If you've got more money coming in than money going out, you're going to build fund balance. If you've got more money going out than's coming in, you got to pull from somewhere, and so you got to pull from your fund balance. And if you've got them just matched, you're basically balancing those cash flows on an annual year. You'll see there's a little bit of variation from one year to the next, and that's really driven by capital funding levels, how much capital you get done in a year. But that's one of the key things we're trying to do is get those two curves aligned. So in the near term, the stormwater revenue that comes from the fee needs to come up in order to be sustainable long term. As I just mentioned, with that water fund transfer, it's making up a lot of the revenues that come in. What we are showing here is that in FY22, which would be the next fiscal year, starting this fall, the fee would need to come up by 225%. And what that would do is right size the amount of revenue coming in. This is revenue first, I'm not talking about the fees. So just the revenue that needs to come from the fees would need to raise by about 222%. And what that would do is right size the revenues where the fee is providing the majority of the revenue, and this would create a sustainable utility going forward. You no longer have to pull from your water and sewer fund. Now in the out years, you can see I've got another 50% and 40% in 23 and 24. Now what that really is, those rate increases after that are really the policy decision with regards to capital funding. And so those additional increases are really aimed at providing some additional cash flows so that you can leverage those grants that are out there and invest in the system. And this is at the 100% capital plan that I just showed you. The next graphic that I've got up here is an option 2. And what I wanted to show here is the sensitivity in the fund to that capital funding level. So I've just made a execution adjustment where I've taken that capital levels and I've taken 50% off of the capital in each year past 22. 22 is really close, so I've left at the same level because you're really planning for that now. But each year going forward, 23 forward, we've cut the capital by 50%. And now the rate increases, instead of being 50% and 40%, you can see are 20, 20, and 15. And so it's brings it down and smooths it out a little, but it really is fundamentally a policy decision about how much capital we want to do and when we want to do it that drives those out-year rate increases. In fiscal year 22, you can see that rate increase is the same as the previous plan because we're just baselining in this next year to make sure we can pay for operations. So with that, I'll move on to the next component of the analysis, which is the fee basis. And where we'll start there is with the current fee. So under the current fee, before we make any recommendations for change, there's really two customer classes. There's single family and there's non-single family. It's currently on your monthly utility bill with water, sewer, solid waste. And for single family, they are charged a flat rate each month. So that rate doesn't vary for the size of the parcel or the amount of impervious area. It's a flat rate. For non-single family or commercial type entities, it's a flat rate again, but a little bit of a different level. It's $888 a month for that one. I'm showing it annually here. But again, does not vary for larger parcels or smaller parcels or maybe parcels with a lot of impervious area, which we'll talk about in a second. So how do we measure the benefits of stormwater services to a parcel? On this particular slide over to the left, I've got kind of a hierarchy, if you will, of the different ways that communities will look at a parcel and think about how they're receiving benefits from the stormwater system. And so in the first, there's taxable value. And so really thinking about before even stormwater is brought into an enterprise fund, oftentimes communities will fund it out of their general fund, and the majority of general funds will come from property taxes ad valorem. I don't think there's a real good connection between taxable value necessarily and the stormwater potential of a parcel, but if we move down, you can see flat fees like what Lynn Haven has in place currently that have a fee, but it doesn't change per parcel or doesn't consider the developmental characteristics of a parcel. Dwelling units, gross area, pervious area, and impervious area. Now, gross area is the size of the parcel overall. Pervious area is going to be the area within a parcel that has not been paved over yet. So it's kind of left in its natural state or maybe has turf grass on it. And an impervious area is going to be the area on a parcel where some hard surface has been placed that disrupts the hydrological cycle. So water's not going to be permeating anymore. You can think of it like a parking lot. Now, why is that really important? That's considered kind of the gold standard in our industry with regards to measuring the impacts or the potential use of a parcel of the municipal stormwater system. And this graphic over here, I think, really displays this. So you've got kind of two parcels identical in size. The one here is undeveloped, so it's going to be all pervious. And when we think about a storm event there, we've really got kind of a 0.2 runoff coefficient. So, you know, for every gallon that hits it, 20% is going to run off, but the majority of that's going to infiltrate. It's going to want to sink into the soil and go through the normal cycle. Now, what happens after development, we're going to have some buildings and some hard surfaces. That runoff coefficient is typically going to come up pretty dramatically. And we're going to see when a rain event occurs that there's going to be a lot more runoff happening on that property. In addition, the runoff is also typically going to contain some pollutant loadings. And the city has to then manage those. They're going to go into the municipal system, especially during the really hard rain events. Everybody gets connected to the system, and the stormwater services need to be sized in order to meet those demands. And so at the simple saying at the end of the day, I like to say it's kind of, if you pave it, you need to pay for it. A lot of people really understand that when you make that change, you really got to have some funding for stormwater in order to service that parcel. Now, what we did as part of the study is we got in contact with the Bay County property appraiser, and interestingly enough, for stormwater purposes, when a parcel's developed or any building takes place, we get some really good information in the property appraiser's database with regards to what's on every parcel. Thinking about the buildings and the pavement, that impervious area stuff is really pretty much shelf ready for us to take, organize it, and use it for a stormwater rate study. So we were able to get a hold of that information for each and every parcel within the city. In total, it's about 33 million square feet of impervious area that resides within the city's boundaries that you're then sizing a municipal stormwater system to manage. So it's a lot of area, and it's a lot of impervious area that generates runoff. And this building over here is just kind of an example of that. You know, it's got canopy, you know, base area, loading platforms. All of this area comes to us in some really good detail as those permits are filed and activities take place on the parcel. Additionally, going forward in time, it makes a really good database to be able to update impervious area going forward, because as new parcels are added or even as